This show today, I have a very special guest that's joining me, Jay Steinfeld,
Yeah,
the author of
that's it.
Lead from the Core, The Four Principles of For Profit and Prosperity. Did I get that right, Jay?
Yeah, Jay Steinfeld, the author of Lead from the Core, The Four Principles for Profit and Prosperity. I think
Yes.
you got that. Yes.
Yes, I got that, as well as the other stuff that you have here on the screen. I don't know if you can see it, but
Yep.
founder of blinds.com that led up to being sold to Home Depot. And I think it was Lowe's and Home Depot, according to your book, that were really interested in your company.
Thank
And it
you.
was probably one of the first e-commerce companies of its kind to do so. Also, Inc. columnist and also entrepreneur in residence at Rice University. How are you?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me.
It's great to have you. And I have gotten through a nice little chunk of the book. So I definitely am recommending that to those who are reading. I'll show my copy and let the rest of you be jealous who haven't gotten your copy yet. And I am certainly enjoying it. So I definitely want to talk about the four principles and profit prosperity. That part is really important, and that's the core of your book. But I want to ask you also about a lot of things that are going on today. You being an employer and having employed a few thousand people in your lifetime, some hot topics, and I like to see what you think of them, and that's okay.
Sure.
All right. So job hopping is trending upwards, especially in the past few months, but it's been going on for a long time, quite honestly. And there's some industries that's been more acceptable than others. But ultimately, I would love your perspective on the pros and cons of a job seeker who's maybe worked three jobs in the last year or two. And whatever your perspective is, will be your perspective, and there's no judgment here. Just asking entrepreneurs to give what they think.
Sure. I'm happy to express myself. It's actually one of my three core values to express yourself. And that means to be honest and authentic and
Hmm.
say exactly what's on your mind as long as you are respectful.
Yes.
So I would say that if you don't have a job that you like, you should leave. But having said that, job hopping does not seem like a very good strategy. Yes, I know you could get some more money, but isn't it tiring to be looking for a job while you have an existing job? Are you really doing the best that you can? But really, why are you even looking in the first place? You have the opportunity to go wherever you want now because most employers are desperate. They need people and they allow you to work from home in many cases. I mean, there's certain jobs, obviously, that you have to be there, but there's more and more jobs where employers are saying it's okay to work wherever you want. You don't have to come into the office. That means you've got more opportunities. So it's incumbent on. So I don't say to you don't look. Of course, look if you can get a better job. You should always be looking to do the best that you can. But why are you looking in the first place? It's because the employers aren't giving you reason to stay. Is it just for the money and you're having to look elsewhere to get more money? Well, obviously, you need to be able to pay the bills. But if the company is not providing you a purpose, if the company is not saying, here's why we exist, and here's why you play such an important part in why we exist and how we're going to get there, what's the reason? Are you just doing it to make money? Or are you doing it because you're doing something consequential and that you feel consequential? Is there humanity in your workplace? Are you being personally developed? Are you being treated with respect? Is your employer generous to you? And by generous, that can mean money, but it can mean the opportunity to voice what you believe is right, to become and clearly what you want to be, and be able to discuss with your employer what your future looks like to you. If they don't give you that voice, if they don't give you the opportunity to say what you want, then you're going to look elsewhere because they don't respect you. They don't respect you as a person. And why wouldn't you want to go someplace else? Wouldn't you want to be in a place where you're doing something of high consequence and you yourself are feeling consequential as a result of that? So I don't despair when I see this
Hmm.
happening, but I do believe that it's incumbent upon the employer to give people a reason to stay and not look in the first place. In the past, people have done that, but now it's so easy to leave that I think it's the employer's fault that employees are looking.
That's a very interesting perspective, and that kind of aligns with what I see and very often get a lot of feedback on doing a lot of live shows and leading groups of job seekers who are looking to do something new and they want to be more calculated, informative, and much more strategic. One of the reasons I hear, especially from younger people, the Gen Z and millennials, even though we're running out of calling millennials young people anymore, but I digress. But a lot of them are saying that even though they got positions and they got money, they feel like the key component is the advancement part, is the mentoring part. It's the being able to reach out and hear what I have to say part. A lot of times it's the old guard that is, being the gatekeeper and saying that, but we have all this work to do, which, you can have it both ways if you want as a company, but if you're talking about building the future, don't you want to build it more with people who are the most experienced and good at the job, rather than being good at the job and you have to change your locks every year.
Exactly. And what also happens is if you're transient and moving from place to place, then what kind of connections do you have with the people there? Do you know anybody? Do you feel any bond with anyone? Do you feel a bond with your peers? Do you even know who your peers are? These are things that happen. And when you job hop, you cannot develop those types of relationships. And you must have relationships, you must have teams to be able to do anything of consequence, because no single person can do anything of consequence. It does require a team. If you
Hmm.
don't even know who your teammates are, if you can't bond with them, if you don't know their move, I mean, the best sports teams know each other's moves, and you have to know each other's moves. And that doesn't happen when you're working one place and somebody else is working someplace else, and you don't have the ability to learn what each other needs to do their job. You don't even know who they are. And if you want to move up, people are going to go to the people they know. And if you're not there, they don't know you. And how are you going to move up? So I think I know a 31-year-old who lives in California and has gotten a job in New York as a project manager.
Hmm.
And he's decided he could live in California if he wants to, or move to New York. He's going to move to New York because of all the things I said. He wants to be noticed. He wants to be able to create relationships with the people he's going to be working with. He wants to be more effective and more productive with these people. I know another one who's 35 or 36, and he wants to work from home, and they want him to come into the office. So he's got a dilemma. So everybody is a little different. Everybody has different situations. But job hopping, just in general, cannot be good for the employee, and it's definitely not good for the all the peers that you're going to be working with. And how are you going to achieve something? Because it takes time. Yes, you work really hard,
Hmm.
but the best results, you have to have patience. And while you work as focused as you can on today, if you're not patient about tomorrow, it'll never happen. And that's how you build things of significance with bonded teams, patient, working towards the future, common alignment. That's not going to happen with transient job hoppers.
Good enough. Thank you for that. I appreciate that perspective. Want to get your perspective. A lot of things have. kind of going some of everywhere, and there are different opinions everywhere. But I think ultimately people are kind of looking out for themselves and their career advancement, and they're either having a choice of, and I understand what you're saying completely. Thank you. Um, Here's what often comes up as well is about core values, and that's something that's really big in your book. And there is the idea that core values should and really do matter a whole lot more than what people think and what companies think. So how do companies sift the candidates that don't share their core values? And maybe you can even talk about how about job seekers that don't find companies that share their core values, and how do you know that the company is true to what they say they are?
Well, there's a lot to unpack there,
Yeah,
Mark.
it is.
So let me see if I can be sort of general, and then we can work down to some of the more specific
Okay.
things you asked about.
All right.
The first thing is when I first started in business a while ago,
Mm-hmm.
I didn't believe in core values. I didn't believe in purpose, mission, any of that stuff. It seemed like they were just soft, squishy ideals
Mm-hmm.
created by somebody else that were put on a plaque, hung on a wall, and never thought of again. But then I realized that there really are some reasons to exist. And if you don't know what those are, then you're really not existing. You're just there. You don't have a purpose. So what is life really about if you don't have a purpose, if you're not striving towards something?
Mm-hmm.
And I realized that it does matter. Now, if you're a person who needs work, you're going to take any work because you've got to pay the bills. I get that. And if your core values aren't aligned, you just gut it out. But when you have a choice and you've got some time to find the right place, then if your core values are not aligned, you're not going to have much fun. It's not going to be a good time for you or the people with you. I founded blinds.com, and really the key to our success was our culture, was our 4 core values, the 4 E's, which I talk about in my book religiously.
Mm-hmm.
The first E is about evolving continuously. You have to change. You can't be the same, and you have to help everybody around you get better. The second is experimentation. Experiment without fear of failure. You have to take chances in order to get better. The third is to express yourself. You have to have a voice, and you have to be able to disagree. And the fourth is, as I had mentioned earlier, to do consequential work, people have to be consequential. And you are consequential when you are changing, when you're not stagnant, when you're growing, when you're disrupting yourself and helping others disrupt themselves so that together you're disrupting the competition.
Mm-hmm.
That's fun. That's the 4th E. That's enjoy the ride. Now, what we did in terms of sifting people out was we tried to sift them out right at the interview process. We looked very carefully at core values because it was our secret sauce. It wasn't our technology. It wasn't anything. We didn't have any defensible moat except for our core values. But it was a strong one, and it's what allowed us to beat everybody, Amazon, the big boxes, and why Home Depot ultimately did buy us. And therefore, what you would want to do is ask some behavioral questions, like give me some examples of when you have reached out to do some things that were uncomfortable. We want to see if people would experiment without fear. Give me some examples of what you're doing right now in your life to get better at anything. And if a person would say, well, of course I want to expand. Of course I'm the kind of person who evolves. So, well, give me some examples. And if they couldn't give examples, they were not hired. Simple as that. You have to show that you are already the kind of person who does experiment and evolve and express yourself and likes to have fun right from the beginning. And if they don't have that, we don't hire them. So the key to alignment and, quote, sifting out is to do it as early up the funnel as you can. Do it before they're even hired, because it's better for you and it's better for them. Because if they're not aligned, if they're the kind of person who doesn't want to evolve, who thinks they know it all and thinks that they're pretty smart, and won't take feedback, then in a week or 2 weeks, they're going to feel so uncomfortable because everybody else around them is growing. And they're going to feel potentially even ostracized. They're not going to feel comfortable, and ultimately they're going to exit themselves. So I'm not saying that those core values should be the same core values of anyone else. Those
Mhm.
were ours. But whatever they are, search deeply into your interviews and find out how you can ferret out the people who are not aligned. And if you don't know your core values, then that's that's another thing. You better find out, because if not, you're going to keep getting people that you think are skilled at what they're supposed to do, but because they're not aligned, they don't last. Why don't they last? Because they're not aligned with what your purpose is. And when they are aligned, oh my God, you can do almost anything.
Well, I thought in your book it came a kind of a watershed moment for me as far as the values. You were explaining in the book how there was somebody in your leadership group that it came to a time where the values really didn't match, and that person really wouldn't have been a match for the next step. So you end up hiring someone over them,
Right.
which, that happens every day. But I don't think it became any more clearer at that moment when you had gave that example, because a lot of people experience that every day and don't see the significance of that. So you get in a spot where you're working with someone and all of a sudden the work begins to show, and that's probably the first place. And then second place is probably where they begin to withdraw their ideals and the ideas and the involvement in the team, because they're seeing too that the synergy is gone.
Yeah, I will say that if 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 they are a core value, that means they're core. They're part of your DNA.
Right.
And those don't normally change. It's hard to change what drives you. I mean,
Hmm.
my core value, even though I've changed over the years, I have a lot less hair. My core
Join the
values,
club.
my core values are still the same.
Yeah.
So the company can also change. The strategies can change. The missions can change. The direction that you go can change, but the core values don't. The core values stay true because they're core. That's what drives your behavior. So if you've got people who really don't have those core values, you're going to find that out pretty soon.
Mhm.
And and if you made a mistake, then you must rid yourself of that person. You have to,
Yeah.
because it's just going to be too much suffering for both. I believe the story in the book was more about somebody who had the core values, but just couldn't get past what was needed for that
Okay.
job.
Hmm.
And in that situation, because they still maintain the core values, why not find another place in the company for that person? Or
Hmm.
keep that person in a more supporting role and not in that leadership role anymore, but be honest with them and tell them this is what's happening, and don't make it a shock. That's respect. That's generosity. That's letting them know this is what's lacking. This is what we need. And over time, they'll see the light. You see the light that you needed to bring somebody in. You let them know you're bringing somebody in because they're aligned with core values and they've done such a good job. You can stay in that position, but we're bringing somebody in at this other level. This is a new level. This is a new level of responsibility, of a different job description, and therefore the skills and the experience that that person had, who was able to get to, let's say, X, you need X plus two. And so you need an X plus two candidate now.
Hmm.
And they can stay in that X position, or maybe they move to a different position, or they move to even a different department. We had somebody in finance that moved into a project manager position, had no training in that at all, but she had a strong propensity and aptitude to do it. And she's delighted in that role. So I think it's make sure that if they're aligned, if not, get rid of them. If they are, find a place for them. There's probably a place somewhere in the organization.
Yeah, that I love that. I love all of that, and I really That makes me want to dig in the book even a little deeper, and to understand that I think ideally people hear about finding companies that share the core value, but there are two sides to every aspect of it. Sometimes it's you may not be able to go further because you may not have the talent and skills, and that only, and you could still share, the core values, but it may not. It may you may just fall short, and that happens a lot.
Right.
And sometimes then you may need to go somewhere else or go where you can be found. But the last thing I do want to talk about, and thank you for sharing all that, is the idea of servant leadership, and I know that's something that you believe in, and I want your perspective and how important that has been for you as a leader during the pandemic.
Well, I don't believe every leader has to be a servant.
Okay,
If you're at
fair enough.
war or if you're in a harsh situation where things just have to happen fast,
Hmm.
let's call it a turnaround, where the company is about to go out of business, it's about to implode, and everybody is about to lose their job. That is not a time for servant leadership.
Hmm.
That is a time for somebody to take charge and just who's experienced and say, this is what we have to do. We have to do it now, fast. And there's fast action that has to happen. You're not looking to develop people. You're just trying to keep people alive. You're
Hmm.
trying to keep the organization alive. So, now, as much as I believe in servant leadership, there are times when it's not needed. In fact, it's probably not even a good strategy. Some people call it wartime CEOs versus peacetime CEOs. I was
Hmm.
describing wartime. The peacetime, which is a lot more fun, and what I try to do all the time was enjoy the ride, is to think about that you cannot do it alone. We mentioned teamwork before.
Hmm.
Once you realize that it requires a team to do everything, and that you micromanaging a team will never get that team to be uh, autonomous enough, confident enough to be able to make decisions where you are not the bottleneck.
Hmm.
Once you realize that, then you're going to say, please, I don't want to make decisions. I want you to make the decisions. And the servant leadership is to, one, make that decision, and two, provide whatever tools, money, support, technology, processes, capital allocation to make sure that that happens. Because if you don't, if all you do is say it and you don't provide the support, it's still not going to happen.
Yeah.
So servant leadership is making people autonomous, giving them the pride of what they're doing, to feel that they're doing significant work and that they themselves are feeling significant.
Hmm.
That's what it takes. That to me is what servant leadership is.
Gotcha. Gotcha. And I appreciate that because I think, as leaders and people who do believe in servant leadership, they've served up in the time until it's time to change speeds. You'll have a lot more buy-in, as if you weren't before and you're taking helm, you might be detaching the head from the rest of the body. So,
True.
it's probably even better if you're at that time. People know that if you're there's a time to say charge, and you've got to go full speed ahead. But to some degree, you've earned that time because all that time you've been building and you've been building carefully, and you've been making sure people are taken care of in
Right.
preparation for that war and
You
that
put in
time
those
when it
emotional
happened.
deposits and those trust deposits,
Yes,
so then you can make some withdrawals at
yes,
that time. I want to
absolutely.
say a little something, if I could, Mark, about the idea of buy-in,
Okay.
because buy-in is something that seems is not really servant leadership.
Hmm.
But I
Okay.
think what you want is not to get buy-in on things, but you want to have alignment, and that you want people to have a voice in where you're going. Not
Mhm.
so much to get buy-in, but because you want their input.
Good point.
because you want to hear from people. Because when you hear from all the people, all the disparate people in your organization, no matter who they are, you're going to be getting different points of view. And different points of view means different angles and different data. And when you have more data, you can make better decisions. So I want to hear from everybody, not to get buy-in, but to be able to make better decisions. And we as a team, therefore, make better decisions. And we're already bought in because we had a voice in that decision.
Excellent. Thank you for that. Thank you very much for joining me on the show. If people want to know more about you, how do they find more information or
Well,
content?
yes, I'm all over LinkedIn. So you connect with me on LinkedIn. And
Mhm.
then also my website, jsteinfeld.com, has a lot of information about me. You can visit and find out more of the things that I'm working on, articles that I've written, and I write for Inc. magazine. So go to inc.com and you'll see a lot of stuff that I'm posting. So there's all sorts of ways to connect with Jay Steinfeld.
Great. Well, I'm glad you connected with me, and thank you, sir. It was quite an honor. And thank the rest of you for joining me on the Voice of Job Seekers Live. You are welcome to dig out this on any of my timelines. You'll see this also on my YouTube channel, and you'll hear it again in the winter months in the podcast. In the meantime, peace in the valley of love, and thank you very much for joining me. And Jay, thank you very much for joining.